This is the In the Rabbit Hole episode archive project. What you're about to watch and listen to is a past episode from In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival Podcast. You can learn more by visiting intherabbithole.com. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel now.
And now, here's two guys that are allowed at the gun range with no pants, Aaron and Jonathan.
Howdy, and welcome to episode 62 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. In this episode, we survived the Prepper Dip. We're your hosts, Aaron
and Jonathan.
And you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Today's show is sponsored by Cat's Coffee. If you're looking for truly exceptional coffee to help you survive the morning or the next zombie apocalypse, you need to be drinking Cat's. They specialize in the finest coffee from sources that prioritize environmental responsibility and are fair trade certified. Their goal is to achieve perfection in every cup. Check them out at Katz, K-A-T-Z as in zebra, coffee.com, or click on their bright green banner on the site and make sure you're dealing with an official sponsor of the show. Again, that's Katz, K-A-T-Z as in zebra, coffee.com.
So, today, our 60-second show, we've kind of gotten tired of this. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it really is.
You guys are getting us. We get lots of emails. I mean, you expect us to come up with new topics every day or every week. I mean, it feels like every day. That much work. So we quit. We're done. It's over. At least that's the way I feel. Aaron can't even keep a straight face. It's ridiculous.
I suck. I'm sorry. April Fools.
I'm trying to do an April Fool's joke.
Oh, yeah.
He can't even not laugh.
It's all that Dayquil I drank before the show.
Hey, I did allergy meds last week. You get Dayquil. Next week, we both do meth. We're good.
Awesome. Well, that would be a weird show.
Although our April Fool's does kind of lead into the overall point of the show, which is that at some point or another, in everything that you do with intensity, you're going to reach a point where you hit a hard spot, or you get to that point where you can't keep the enthusiasm up. So something gives. And a lot of times it means you put something in a closet and forget about it, or you just stop doing it. You know, you take up golf and all of a sudden the clubs end up dusty and in a closet and rusted, or you take up photography and you can't even remember where the camera is. With survival and preparedness, you can't really give up. I mean, that kind of defeats the purpose. And we all know that, but I think where we are and a lot of people are, we've been through our dip already. You know, Aaron and I have done that.
The dip is not just a one-time thing. And,
oh, no, definitely not.
And if you don't know what we're talking about yet, you haven't experienced it, trust me, at some point, you will come to the point where you stop and go, God, is this really all worth it? I mean, really, this just seems like a lot to do, or there's a myriad of reasons, and we'll run through them in a minute, that may be things that you'll come up against. But you either, with prep, like anything in life, you're either coming up on your dip, you're already in your dip, you've come out of it, and you're waiting for the next one.
Right.
And I can tell you, I'm pretty sure I've been through at least 3 dips when it comes to preparedness. Because you do. You look around and you think, this is a lot of work. I mean...
And some of you, by the way, who are out there thinking 3 dips sounds delicious. We're not talking about guacamole, queso, and salsa here.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but no, I mean, you got to add a little humor to it, and I think that's part of the problem. You know, when you get to these dips, usually there's a level of seriousness you put in something, and when you can't add the humor or the entertainment, or that's actually a lot of times when the dip happens, when it's no longer fun. That's kind of a good place to kind of add that back in, put the levity back in, and remember why you started in the first place. All of that. So we'll get into the show a little bit and go from there.
Yeah, so kind of in prep, there are several reasons that people get into it. I mean, aside from they almost become too serious about it or lose sight of why they even really started it in the first place. But some of these reasons are, it's a lot of work, like I said a second ago. It's very expensive, which it can easily become if you let it. And let's face it, it's not hard for prep to become expensive.
Anyone taking it seriously enough or with the interest level enough to be listening to this podcast on a weekly basis, and I know that's us included, by the way, could easily spend way too much money on doing it. And that's, a lot of the shows focus on, we've talked a lot about you don't have to spend tons of money. And it's all about proper budgeting, and you don't want to overspend either, because what you don't want to do is make the rest of your life less tolerable because you're preparing for something that may or may not happen. So it's all about making your own life better. But wow, talking about making things expensive, I think, Aaron, you and I can...
I don't even want to talk about it.
See, it's a dip. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, we have managed to, at times, spend more than we should have. Usually because we didn't educate ourselves enough about something in the first place, or we thought we could solve the problem with tools and not skills. But expense is an easy way to burn yourself out fast.
Absolutely. And another one is how much time you can spend on it.
Right.
God knows when Jonathan and I both started and all of our friends got into prep, not all of our friends got into prep, but the friends of ours that did get into prep, we all spent so much time online in reading books, talking about it, thinking about it, massaging it. And there were where we get together a group of friends it's changed nights, but now it's on Thursday nights. We get together a very core group of friends, and we sit around and we talk about our lives and we BS about things and all kinds of stuff. And we had people that stopped showing up, and they were like, well, I didn't want to come anymore because I really am not that interested in it. And that's all any of you talk about anymore. So it can become very consuming and time consuming, especially. And let's face it, time is kind of one of the most precious things we all have in life because we only get so much of it. And unfortunately, none of us know exactly how much time we get. That's another big one that people get frustrated with. And it's that, God, I'm spending all of my time doing this, and is it really worth it? And then the other one is, well, people make fun of me. I'm tired of people making fun of me. I'm tired of my friends saying, oh, why are you spending all that time doing that? That seems like a big waste of time. What are you worried about? Oh, you're tinfoil hat guy. Oh, okay. Or any number of other things. I have friends that certainly have done that.
Sorry, man.
It's all your fault. Bastard. Why do I hang out with you?
I don't know.
No.
Because I'm so awesome.
Yeah.
It's because we can't find other friends. That's what it really is.
That's what it is. I only hang out with you because no one else wants to hang out with me, that is.
Exactly.
Because I've become so weird.
But that I agree with you. I think that's probably one of the leading things that happens is people are like, well, a lot of people I know think this is really bizarre. And that's, again, one of the things we think is so important about the idea of urban prep and chi is that it's really not about the tinfoil hat wearing stuff. I mean, you can, if you're worried about things that other people think are tinfoil hat, that's fine. I'm not going to judge you. I really am not. But my view of it is the things that we can concern ourselves with most are the things that are most likely to happen. And that allows you to not burn out too, right? Like in Houston, for instance, we use Houston as an example all the time because it's something we know. You know that on an annual basis, there is a chance of hurricanes. Well, it's hard to burn out when every year you know that problem is coming out. I mean, you got to be prepared regularly. Or if you live in the Northeast or the Midwest, Northern Midwest, and you know that every year there's a good chance there's going to be a blizzard or 2 or 3 or 3 weeks that you might be frozen in. it allows you to kind of stay on your toes a little bit. But being here, even in Central Texas, where we don't have quite as many issues. Yeah, we've had the drought recently and there were some fires. It's a little bit harder to pinpoint a specific thing. So I know a lot of people, it becomes more of a burnout issue where it might be 5 years between major droughts like we had where you see those types of fires. You don't see tornadoes like you do in the Midwest as regularly. You never have a blizzard. And if you do have snow, it maybe snows you in for 24 hours, not 3 weeks.
And only because no one's used to it.
Right, and exactly. And it's not because it really snowed you in. It's just because for some reason nobody knows how to drive when there's snow falling from the sky and not sticking to the ground. So, but I mean, again, joking aside a little bit, it's easy to burn out when you're here because it's not something you're getting ready for soon. Even in Houston, I know a lot of people burn out when it's not hurricane season. I don't have a hurricane to worry about because it's December now. So I'm not even going to think about it until next July. And it's just one of those easy things to do. But if you're preparing for things that happen and the things that aren't the tinfoil hat things, then even if you do have some, let's just say, more extreme concepts of what might happen, you'll still be ready. And you don't have to necessarily talk to people about those things. You can talk more about the everyday. It also is an easy way to bring them into prepping. Because if it's something that is likely to happen and something they know and understand, then, you don't have to worry about telling them about solar flares when you can be talking about something simple like a hurricane or a blizzard.
Or job loss.
Yeah, that's an easy one.
Yeah. So, I mean, to kind of go back to solar flares, if we just take solar flares for a second, if someone has never considered or thought of what could happen after a giant solar flare, and let's say it's on the magnitude of you could survive it, and it hasn't scorched half or all of the earth. It's just an EMP and it knocks everything out. That's a big one in the community that people like to worry about. But if you try to position that to somebody that has never heard of it before, that's a lot to take in. Because what's going through their mind? There's a ton of questions. Well, holy crap. How do I prepare for that? I mean, that just seems insurmountable because all of a sudden you've presented them with a problem that really does seem completely insurmountable. I got to insulate all my electronics. I got to find a bunker. I got to get 3 years worth of food. I got to find a date for the event. I got to figure out what I'm going to wear.
Right.
It's a lot to take in. But, as we've talked about in convincing others to prepare, you present it to them in a way that they can bite-sized pieces get onto. And we kind of have to do the same thing for ourselves so that we stay away from this dip, which is take things in little bite-sized pieces. But to kind of go back for a second, one of the commonalities that you'll almost always run into with any kind of dip, and I'm going to illustrate it with a story and a bit of a farm update in just a second, which is, am I doing all of this for nothing? Or am I getting enough out of this? And to kind of illustrate it, and I get to sneak in a farm update with it too, but recently...
You do love to do those.
I do.
And they're usually entertaining. So.
They are. And this one, actually, there's a lot to learn from it. And it's not just Jason McCall and I complaining about how we're terrible farmers, which we are. But the issue we ran into was last weekend, we had moved up some more rabbit cages. And we're standing there and we've got all of this space. If I had to guess, I'm not even going to try to guess at this point. It's somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 square feet, which doesn't seem like a lot. But if you're used to urban environments where square footage really is a premium, that's a lot of area to just be able to play with and do whatever you want, especially if it's a bare area that is not like a yard or something. This is a space, a concrete space we are having to completely from scratch turn into something. We're looking at it and we're moving these cages in, and Jason kind of stops and he's like, I don't know anymore. We're spending lots of time on this and we're spending lots of money on this. And look at us. Look at how many rabbits we got. I mean, we're terrible at this. Maybe we should just go fishing instead and just say, screw it.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew exactly where he was coming from. I mean, I was in part kind of thinking the same thing. In another part, I was choosing to ignore that. But the idea was we were looking around at what we had, and in the last year, we hadn't gotten really anywhere we wanted to be. And our idea was that by now, we would be in full production with our rabbits, and that full production meant 20 does. And what we actually have is 12 rabbits total, which includes the 3 original does, 1 buck, 5 new does, and 3 new bucks, which are going to be eaten soon.
Oh, they are $3, huh?
Yeah, they are $3. One of them is from the most recent batch, and 2 of them are from an older batch. So the older batch, they're about 2.5, 3 months old now. So they're ready to be harvested, so to speak. But the other thing that we wanted to do was this big aquaponics and gardening setup. And we've gotten absolutely nothing done in a physical sense for the aquaponics. We've done a tremendous amount of research. There's actually a big 3-ring binder sitting here in the studio that's about 2.5 inches thick. That's all information and diagrams and all the stuff that we've been looking up about aquaponics. But we haven't done anything with it. And then as far as like any kind of garden goes outside of the aquaponics setup, we have 2 4x4 planters set up that are just now starting to produce. I think we have 4 or 5 tomatoes, literally, not plants, 4 or 5 tomatoes. And so it's easy to look around to that and after a year think, what was the point? Spent lots of money and time. So we were kind of getting a little more than a little disgusted with the whole thing. So we sat down over lunch and I said, all right, let's decide here and now. Either we're pulling the pin on this and we're just going to go back up there and we're going to harvest all the rabbits and be done with it, or we're going to figure out what is wrong and how to make it right and how to get past this dip. So Jason wholeheartedly agrees. So we sat down at the local po' boy shop and had ourselves, I don't know what Jason had. I'm not going to go into what I had because it was really fattening. But so we sat down and we said, okay, where have we gone wrong? And we realized that in part, we hadn't really been very organized about it. We've been haphazard about when we do get together and do it. And we hadn't been that realistic about our expectations versus the time and energy put into it. We've been putting in time, but not enough time. And most importantly, not enough organization. And we've gone through that in previous episodes, which we'll link to in the show notes. We hadn't really formed objectives. We had these kind of airy-fairy, loose, kind of nebulous ideas of where we thought we would be. And we never really sat down and said, all right, we're doing this, and we're doing this, and we're doing this, and we're going to complete it in this time frame. And these are the tasks involved that we will need to get done in that time frame to achieve that. And here's the budgets for what we're going to do. And is this really financially realistic, or is it just stupid? Are we pissing money down a drain doing it? So after the conversation, it was like, okay, wait a minute. All right, look, we can get a handle on this thing. There are some real stuff starting to come out now. So we started scribbling some stuff on some napkins. And we're like, all right, we need objectives. Where do we want to be in a year from now? And so we relisted out what our objective was. And then we started saying, what do we need to do to reach those objectives? And then we brought in the piece that kept being missed, which is, what is the realistic aspect of this? I mean, that's great that we want to build, what was it at that point? 12 more rabbit cages to get at least the infrastructure where it needed to be. And that was another problem that we'd had in the past. We were just kind of guessing at things and we weren't really recording how long it took. And so then we sat down and said, all right, how long does that really take us to do per 4-cage section? And so we said, all right, realistically, over the last year, we've learned this, that it takes this much time to build the cages. It takes this much time to build the roof for the cages, and it takes this much time for the watering system. And then we agreed, all right, we know that we actually will only spend about 4 to 6 hours on a Saturday doing this because somebody's always late. Jason showing up to the project. Actually, sometimes it's I like to blame Jason every time, but realistically, he shows up to my house to go do it, and I've always just finished getting ready, and then I like to give him a hard time. Oh, dude, you're 2 hours late. How could you do that?
Oh, you're just saying that so that when he listens to the show, he doesn't cry later.
No. I really am evil. But it was like, okay, this is realistically what time of day we're going to get started doing it. And realistically, this is how much time we usually take for lunch. And this is how much time we wasted Home Depot screwing around. And so we started taking those things into account. We stopped saying, oh, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And we started being realistic about it. We judged ourselves. We said, all right, evidently we actually like taking that long for lunch. We find it enjoyable, which is part of the project, was bro time. So we left that in, and we left how much time we screw around at Home Depot or any other random hardware store we end up at. And so we started really looking at things and breaking it down and say, okay, 4 to 6 hours, we have to break everything up that we want to do in 4 to 6 hours. And it has to either get done in that amount of time, or we're going to pick smaller stuff that we can get done in that amount of time and then save the rest for the next week. And so as we're planning out, we start seeing it. And then we can start seeing really where it's going to go, how long it's going to take. And we could realistically, over the course of a year, say, this is about what we could actually get done in a year, and then go back and look at our objectives again and say, are those realistic objectives based on now what we've figured out? And also based on the budgets that we'd started to figure out, what does it cost to do these projects? How can we stagger those projects? Does this task over here that costs money actually need to be done at that time of the year, or can we swap it with another one? An example would be, there was a part of the rabbit infrastructure that didn't need to happen because during the summer we're not going to be in production. So we don't really need to spend that part of our summer building rabbit cages and roofs and doing all this other stuff, because those cages are just going to sit empty for 3 months. Instead, we can move on to maybe actually getting something done with a garden, or even maybe get something done with aquaponics. That is something that we could really get into production with. As we started breaking things down, and we even went so far to, we put all of our tasks and everything else in a Google Docs folder and then shared that folder with each other. And now we can work on it together, even if we're not face to face, or we can work on it independently, including materials lists for projects and costs for those projects. And we can break it up. I can say, all right, here's the materials list for this, here's the materials list for this, and here's the materials list for this. I'll take this one, you take that one, and we'll split this third one in half. And so this weekend, we're really starting to pick up some steam, and we even managed to finish out one whole half of where the rabbits are. And actually, it was more than half. We are now, I'd say, 80% finished with all of the infrastructure we're going to put in place for rabbits.
Nice.
And
congrats, guys.
Thanks. And we even stopped this weekend. We got all done, and it was kind of late at night. We decided to push it a little bit more than we normally do and really finish out some stuff that we hadn't planned on doing until next weekend, because it was like, well, you know what? We got done with this faster than we thought we would. Let's push it and get an extra project done. So now we're really over that hump, because now we're looking and we're seeing this big, long row of rabbit cages and all this work we've done. And we're looking at how each section of rabbit cages has actually gotten better because we've learned. And we looked at it and we're like, man, we did that one half in half the amount of time it took us to do all the others. We even learned a new evolution of things to do with this last set. And so we've learned stuff to do on the next set to make it go faster and go up smoother, because we suspend all of these rabbit cages. And when we got done, we were really excited, and we were ready, and we were over the dip, because we have a clear understanding of where we're going, what we're doing, and whether or not what we want to accomplish is realistic. And therein lies, and we transition to the solution for getting through the dip, which is
really one of the big ones is setting realistic goals for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on what's going to improve your daily life first, and even setting realistic goals to that. We were talking to one of our listeners recently, and he brought up a great point that he had a really productive year last year when it came to his personal chi plan. And he just blew away everything he thought he was going to blow away. So when writing this year's plan, he was thinking maybe he would set it even more aggressive than he did last year. And one of the things I cautioned against was setting it too aggressively. Take a look at last year and understand how much work it took to do that. Really take a look at what you did. And even he was saying that he did a lot of work and he was feeling a little burnt out. But he was going to set this year's even more aggressive. And I said, take a look at last year and use that as your maximum. That should be your stretch goal, to do the same as you did last year. Because, the first year you ever get into anything, you're going to be that much more enthusiastic. So for year 2, set it a little bit lower, but still set aggressive goals, but not quite as many. And make them a little bit more applicable to the everyday. So now you don't have to take the big leap stuff because you've done that already. Now for all the little things, make those more effective day in and day out. And when he finally built up that plan or took a look at it, he was like, that's a really good way to look at it. Take a look at last year, take a look at this year, and figure out what you really can achieve. Because if you set goals that are too big, then what you end up with is, I just can't do it, so you give up. And if you, at least for me, and if I set goals that are too low, they're just too easy, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. So you kind of have to figure out what you've done in the past and set realistic goals. I mean, Aaron, I don't know, maybe for you it would be a little different, but I think that tends to work for me.
Oh no, I think that is right on. I think that is so it, because that is, and that was one of the points that I was trying to illustrate in the farm, was that that we set unrealistic expectations of what we could accomplish. So the answer was to actually set realistic expectations, become organized, figure out what we needed to do. But that was the big one. And that was the one that was so disheartening to us. And in so many aspects of life, whether it's prep, whether it's anything, are the expectations realistic? Whether it be money, whether it be time, whether it be love, whatever you're after. Are the expectations realistic? So what are the solutions? I mean, this is, we've kind of talked about some loose stuff, but what are the solutions? Well, the solutions, like Jonathan said just a bit ago, and really what we've said all along, is to focus on what improves your life today. And that was one of the questions that Jason McConnell and I had to ask ourselves is this going to improve our lives? Whether things go wrong or not. And the answer was yes. And it was like, okay, well, we can move on to the next question to try to figure things out. But focus on the things that do. We kind of poked fun a little bit at tinfoil hat. It's big, dramatic things a little while ago. And we do that pretty often because those are very easy ways to fall back asleep, to become disinterested, because it is so hard to become prepared for those things. And whether you are or not concerned with those things is really irrelevant. As we've said in the past, if you get yourself prepared for the likely stuff, for job loss or for bad weather in your area or any of the normal things that do happen, then you will be 80% of the way there for the dramatic stuff. And when you get to the end of that, where it's like, okay, I've done all that is reasonable and I've blown it out of the water to prepare for the normal stuff, then you can look back and say, do I want to go forward? Do I want to go past this? Because whatever dramatic thing that I used to see looming on the horizon, is it still there? Does it still concern me? Or have I found new information that disqualifies it as a real concern? Or have I found new information that makes it more of a concern? Either way. But the point is, it's not worth worrying about until you can get through that first 80% and focus on the things that will make your life better today, like getting out of debt, getting in better physical condition. I mean, that one right there, how many of us could be in better physical condition? And I don't mean the Homer Simpson kind of, he would just stand there and his guts hanging out and he'd drink a beer and then the next thing he knows, he's Arnold Schwarzenegger in the mirror.
Oh, wait a minute. What fun is that?
Speaking of realism, but I mean, really, genuinely, I mean, we could all be in better physical condition. So, and that's something else that getting in better physical condition now will make your life better. It'll make you feel better about yourself, and it ultimately will lead to being more productive on a daily basis. And what are other things? Storing food and water. That right there, when people ask, Jeep, the moderator of the forum, has a great expression about that. Where do I start? Buy a case of water and stick it under your bed. Bam. You are 90% more prepared than your neighbors. It's simple. It's easy. So start with the simple stuff and then go from there.
Right. And you know what? Setting successive goals. So if I can do this, and if I do this, then I can do this, and then if I do that, I can do the third thing. Setting that type of successive goal makes things more of a game. And the more of a game and a challenge something is in that way, the more you feel like you've accomplished. So when you have the little goals along the way, you could say, oh, you know what? I got a gallon of water. I got 7 gallons of water. Now I've got 21 gallons of water. Now I've got 32 or whatever it's going to be at some point that you need for your family. And then all of a sudden it's, okay, I've got 3 weeks worth of water for 4 people. And that allows you to kind of build up to something and say, hey, I've accomplished along the way. And when you do that, you see your successes and you can celebrate them by going to the next one.
Exactly. I still handwrite to-do lists. Every morning while I'm drinking my coffee, I write out my to-do list. And I look at my larger to-do list of things and look at what I had intended to get done that day and look at, all right, well, maybe I can squeeze in these extra things. But I still handwrite all of those lists because I love the feeling. I absolutely love the feeling as I go throughout the day. Since it's physical and it's real paper, I can scratch it out. Like it's like a big screw you to whatever that task was. It's like, done. On to the next thing. I am nailing it. I'm beating it up. I may be over caffeinated today. But the point is, like Jonathan was saying, make a game out of it. The same thing with getting out of debt. Debt snowballing is a big one. Who's that? That's Dave Ramsey's pet that he coined. And it really is. And when you first look at debt, if you've got a lot, you're thinking, oh man, that's painful. But if you sit down and really plan it out and say, all right, realistically, we can pay this much to this credit card and this much to this credit card, but we can pay a little extra on this one to start nailing this one down and getting it to go away. And if you map that out, whether by hand or through an Excel spreadsheet or whatever method works for you, over time, you will start to see, as the term suggests or the phrase suggests, you'll start to see that debt snowball. And you'll be able, as you kill one credit card, you'll be able to put whatever amount you're paying towards that one into the next smallest one that you want to kill.
Yeah, and then it becomes, instead of snowballing, actually you're melting.
Yeah. But you really are. You start killing, and you can start really seeing that progress. But there again, like where we kind of started off the show, aside from the April Fool's joke, is that at first it seems rather unsurmountable. But if you take it and break it down and really figure out when and how you're going to do it, then okay, now I have a clear plan. Now I can see where the beginning, middle, and end is, and I know exactly what I need to do to get there. And that's another really good way of staying out of the dip, because as long as you can see the end in sight, and as long as you understand all of the steps involved, you really do a good job of keeping yourself out of that preparedness dip.
Right. There's one other thing I'm going to add to it, and that's not making it one more hobby or just one more thing you do, and making it part of everything you do. And I know that sounds really cliche. That's almost as bad as someone telling you to squeeze the trigger. I mean, it's like, okay, what does that mean? But all of us can do it. And, I did a diet once, and I've done a diet more than once.
I was going to say.
I've never gotten huge, but I mean, I've done more than one different type of diet. And
you are a fat cow.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I mean, neither one of us ever got huge, but we got out of shape. And one of the things that I found that worked well for me is I did this diet that really recommended, on the diet itself, a 21-day thing. And the reason they did 21 days of a strict diet was, I think experts will tell you, and I don't remember what book it comes from, but there's a lot of books that mention it now. It takes 21 days to build a habit. And many of you have been in this now with us from the beginning. So it's been much more than 21 days. And I think for a lot of people, it's become a lot more than just a hobby. It now has become a habit. But when something becomes something you just do, a habit, storing food, copy canning, storing water, going to practice your skills, even going to the range and shooting, when those things become more than just hobbies and they become habits and things you just do, it's much easier to not fall into the dip. I think that's a critical part of it. And I'd say for most people, if you do this for a little while and stick with us through this show for a while, and follow some of the blog. And, just do that for a little bit and get into a group where this becomes more of the way you live and more of habit or just things you do. I don't think about whether or not I need to have lunch. It's just something I do. I think if this becomes like that, then for most of you out there, you won't ever see the dip. And that's the critical thing. It's changing it from a hobby or something you do on the side or just, I do this prepper thing, and not just doing the prepper thing, but being a prepper.
Well said. So to give some props out, we and this is not April Fool's joke. We have a new moderator on the forum, Mr. Redbeard. We'd like to welcome you and thank you for your service to the In the Rabbit Hole forum, which is at forum.intherabbithole.com. And some more props out to the original moderator of the forum, Jeep, who has passed his first block for, I believe it was the volunteer firefighter department. And that is freaking awesome because we know what tremendous effort he has put into that and how much that means to him. And so,
way to go, Jeep.
Yeah, man, that's awesome.
I think it's two more. But I think the first one, from having talked to him, sounded like it was one of the harder ones.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that was a dip too. And that was, we
Mm-hmm.
were talking about that earlier. And then he kind of bounced back from that dip and is really beating it up now. Obviously, he passed that first one and he's moving on to the second one. And we wish him lots of luck going into the second one and even nailing the third one.
So everybody get on the forum and wish him luck and push him through this thing because it is rough.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he's told us about some of the things he's had to do. It is not easy. And for any of you who's been through these types of volunteer fire groups or anything else, you know what it's like. So get on the forum and push him.
This has been an episode from the In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival Podcast. You can learn more by visiting intherabbithole.com. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great survival stuff.